the Chinese soldier fighting, having a war with a Japanese soldier. And then they completely imagining Tibetan kids as a pure Chinese kids to hit Japanese. So this is a hatred. I think for India, my suggestion would be like this: or never trust what they say, but trust what they do. At the end, he says, "You are my father more than the advice I got from my father," he says.
Welcome to Roof of the World, Tibet in Context, a podcast by the Foundation for Non-Violent Alternatives. They would have to learn about Xi Jinping thought and about the structures of the party.
Absolutely. Absolutely. In the boarding preschool material, the reading material, we don't call this a curriculum, but we call it the reading material. It's all filled Communist Party's mission, Chinese nationalist ideology there, and then also Xi Jinping's thought, and there too. It's a field. And then again, seriously, they're also putting the Chinese soldier fighting, having a war with a Japanese soldier. And then they completely imagining Tibetan kids as a pure Chinese kids to hit Japanese. So this is a hatred. They're informing another form of the hatred from such a young age. So hatred means you hit, whether you hit Japanese or other
Taiwanese. Yes.
And then later, the way they will orient them to hit it. At this age, they're just informing the type of the hatred associated with their Chinese nationalist ideology.
And this is a very dangerous stage because we've just heard from Xi Jinping during the two sessions the rhetoric of war and preparing for war. And we've just also heard about military mobilization offices, new ones that have been set up, one of them in Tibet, and several obviously in Chinese cities. And the rhetoric is ramping up, of course, against Taiwan.
Yes.
So this is a very dangerous phase, and they've clearly decided that then influencing the younger generation, this is the way that they are going to harness this.
So I think based on my understanding, my knowledge in knowing the Chinese, they've been prepared this for half a century. It's not about Xi Jinping. Xi Jinping thinks now we have power enough. We're power enough. In 2016, when I heard it, it's a very common conversation when I was in China in 2016. On the ground, they say, "Oh, now it's a time for us to rule the world." How you rule the world? One is economic influence. If the economic influence fail, now you use force. Now we have enough soldiers, equipment, weapons. So it's about they prepared this for half century, I think. But Xi Jinping speeded up this.
He accelerated.
Yeah, he accelerated this level of the awareness in having the time to have the war with the international community or the democratic country system. They wanted to rule their world because when they doing the exercise in the army system, they always say, be ready for war. It's a number of the years, it's not recent, but recently Xi Jinping accelerated level of the temperature about this kind of awareness or sense, having the war with us. I think, to me, the international community, especially Japan, South Korea, Taiwan, and India needed to know this more deeper understanding how China prepared initialized this idea from where, you know? When you teach, when I was teaching the history of the Communist Party, you know, in 1991, in a Tibetan boarding school, I did an experimental teaching there. They asked me to teach the history course. And at that time, I was so happy. Okay, teach Tibetan history. Then the content of the book is completely different. They were asking me to teach Communist Party's history of the revolution in Tibetan language. You know, that's just the early in 1995. I think
How did you manage that situation?
and then sometime I put the Tibetan history content. You know, at that time we're doing this, they're doing this, we're doing this. In our history, the parallel time, and we're doing this. This only be able to, as a teacher, while teaching in the classroom, this is only the chance for me to explain it that way. No other chance. I can't change the curriculum. We don't have a power to change it. So I think the many students teacher did that too. While they ask you to teach the history of them, and then we context of our history a little bit where it could apply, right? That part. So in terms of China, I think becoming more ideologically becoming violent. I think they wanted to implement their ideology by violence, maybe. For example, they wanted to have a war because the training. One of the major slogan in training with their army soldier, they always say, "Be ready for war." When you get in the war, you have a capacity and win the war. Not only engage the war, you have to get the level to win the war.
Right.
You know, that's kind of. It's very dangerous, I think. It's not all the way of the experience we're having now, the Xinjiang, the Tibetan, and the Hong Kong, Mongolia. I think if they succeeded in the war with the rest of the world, or
You mean if they go to
we
Taiwan?
lose. Yeah, we lose against protecting Taiwan. I think they will step up to further to interfere the other countries. That's turn them into the way their system. I think that's a very dead. Now what we're facing now is possibly in the future they're going to implement it to the global context. The one they're going to, if let them succeed, then it's very dangerous, I think. So in this sense, I think international community or democratic society, country, allies needed to increase more the quality of the solidarity to firmly stand together very strongly to turn China or to China, prevent China turn that way, the dangerous way, I think. That's important.
Given your experience in the last year or so of speaking to different governments, Western democracies, governments, parliamentarians, what do you think is, what are your impressions about bearing witness and about how Western governments can influence this trajectory that China is on?
I think...
Because China is completely averse to listening to anybody outside, of course.
Yeah.
So can they create change?
They can change, for sure. Now, if the 10 years or more than 5 years, and then situation going to be too late to change them, I think. Now it's a time to change them because they're, after the lockdown of the pandemic, they're in a weak position. So we stand together.
China is in a weak position.
We, democratic country, need to stand together very strongly. Then they can make a change because the way China interfere in the global context by economic influence. The Western country, sometimes the leader who didn't see this part, I think that China always associates the political agenda with their economic cooperation with the Western country. You cannot separate. Our Western leaders sometimes, somehow, they think they can separate. Economic, politics, you can separate. No, you cannot separate with Chinese because the Chinese already ties the economic and the politics as a one. This is the need to be careful about this. So I carefully observing the international media or the international leadership who are thinking we want to do economic cooperation. Well, at the same time, we'll talk about the human rights and other concerns. It won't work. Never going to work. And then the Chinese think that those kind of leaders are naive from their point of view. This guy is a naive guy. We can treat him. We can cheat him. It's you cannot separate. Western country have to think as a one. When you dealing with the Chinese people, they're always tied in their political agenda and idea plan with economic cooperation. I think if Western country and the leadership will know this, and then they will find out easily to find out how to treat Chinese. First, the second thing is the Chinese and the Communist Party system. I think break into group. I think now, that's a secret source I got from China. They're breaking into two groups, from top to the county level. I think we need to find a way to support the opposite of the Xi Jinping's group, the group who fighting with Xi Jinping. If we support them, the only way to diminish the party in China, the internal breakout. That's a safer way, I think. In order to do that, and then you need to support the opposite group of the Xi Jinping, I think.
There are probably many factions, I imagine. Many factions. So your argument would be that Western governments need to work harder to try to identify those people who are pushing for change inside the PRC.
Yes.
Yeah.
And also the normal Chinese people, scholars, I had many conversations with those scholars and the people. They say, we don't need a party anymore. It's extra expense. The government have a two system. We needed to fit them to double system. We don't need it. We have a government system. That's if they function well, then we don't need a party system.
And do you think that is gaining ground? That idea?
Yeah. We have that ground.
Articulating that.
Yeah.
Yes.
We have that ground. They have that kind of ground. I think they have that kind of people there. Not many, but number of the good scholars thinking that way. If we easily turn into the democratic state and the country system, we only need a government system without the party system. I got a conversation with a number of the Chinese scholars there. And also on ground level, the ordinary people could see the situation. They also have this kind of opinion. Yeah.
The government of India, of course, have direct experience of dealing very, they're there on the border. There's a lot of tension on the border now. It's also very much in the government of India's interests to protect the Tibetan civilization. So many Himalayan Buddhists, around 50 million people across the Indian and Nepalese Himalayas, are loyal to the Dalai Lama and to Buddhism and so on. And so you would also suggest that the government of India need to be very alert to what's happening in these schools, the efforts to influence the younger generations in Tibet and to?
I think for India, my suggestion would be like this: or never trust what they say, but trust what they do. You make your decision based on what they do, not what they say. That's a very serious, I think. China people has a high score to lying people. They say something nice, do differently. Even individual people, ordinary people do that too. I've been dealing with, working with those Chinese figures, Chinese scholars and people almost over 3 decades. I know them how to do that work. They have their own plan, never said to you, never share with you, but they can cheat you and then let you do their way that he want. At the end, they're gonna take action. At that time, you're too late. You know, in this sense, I think the Indian or other country too. I think you never trust what they say. Yes, you need to see what they do. Your decision should be based on what they do, not about based on what they say. I think this is a characteristic of the China's culture and Chinese people's personality. It's the way it carry out from the history, their culture. But at the same time, Chinese Communist Party also destroyed their valuable culture too.
Yes.
Yeah, their valuable culture not there in the society, nowhere to practice it. Then people fully turn into what the Chinese Communist Party designed throughout their education system. You know, that's why the army and red card and all those officials easily can be organized as a uniform, wearing the uniform, behaving in the same way, like everything they do is in that way. This is they designed. They prepared this from the early education age. Now they wanted to eradicate our culture and identity, language, everything. They speed it up. Xi Jinping speed it up from age 4 to 6.
And you were recently in India and you saw the Dalai Lama.
Yeah.
That must have been a very powerful meeting for you.
Yeah, I saw that I reached the full meaning of my life after I had an audience with His Holiness Dalai Lama. I totally satisfied with my life. I feel like that because I almost get 1 hour meeting audience with him. We got a very deep emotional change. While crying, I cried almost all the time. And he also giving also, invisible emotional exchange got and moved him a lot, I think, at the same time. I appreciate it when you mentioned India, and then as a scholar, I know how much should I appreciate that. Grateful for the Indian sport. That's such a significant to maintain our history and maintain this nation, have a future. That's I see that level. So my appreciation and grateful from that kind of ground. Wherever I see Indian people, I don't know. I'd be nice to them. For example, when I arrived in Toronto in January 2nd, 2021, I did a butler job in a coffee shop there's two Indian guy started learning the cooking in the restaurant, in that restaurant. We collaborate. We don't know each other before. In the restaurant, we collaborate so very well that. Yeah, I sort
You
of
understood each other somehow.
Yeah, I supported him. He appreciated me. At the end, he says, "You are my father more than the advice I got from my father," he says. Indian guy. At the age of 22, I think they're pretty good. They're college students. Yeah. A concrete example like that. Yeah.
So there were you, one of the highest educated Tibetan scholars from Amdo who've worked at the highest levels of Chinese and Tibetan education, working in a coffee shop with an Indian young man.
Yeah. So that's a concrete example I can give. That's a
journey.
So
and His Holiness the Dalai Lama won't have had many opportunities to speak to anybody like you for some years, because the scholars have stopped coming from Tibet. They're not able to travel.
For me, is I learned the cultural and experience and education, and I also get the PhD from Western country university. And quite, I think that knows the academic level in the Tibetan culture, and also in the academic level in the English sociology. So in this area, I can do the top work. Yeah. I'm not sure the other part, but in sociology part, I can do the top for the Tibetan. Yeah.
And you have brought a very precious testimony to the Dalai Lama and the Tibetans in exile. And what gives you hope in terms of those connections with the Tibetans in the diaspora and the Tibetans inside Tibet? Because there's such a huge gulf now between them.
I think there's a very good commonality there, I realized after I visited Dharamsala. And while also traveling around the Western country here, I realized that while Chinese is educated, our young generation, not that much in culture, but by raising Han nationalism, and then they also raise our Tibetan nationalism too. Our young generation has a great passion on the Tibetan nationalists. And at the same time, I saw the same way in the diaspora, the Tibetan youth. They have a good quality of the education. They have a good passion. That's a similarity with our youth from inside outside. I gave the advice somewhere. I think we needed to prepare to be the leadership to lead those youth in the future, both inside and outside, together. That's so important. And even after His Holiness passed away, that's only the hope we can have, I think.
So this is not about a material culture and materialistic culture.
No.
This is about a more intangible means of connection, a more spiritual Tibetan Buddhist civilization.
This is about Tibetan nationalist, I think. Tibetan patriotic, I think. That's as a glue will tie them together from inside outside the youth, I think. The inside people, since the Chinese exclude the Tibetan Buddhism in the textbook classroom, they don't learn that much. I think they don't have it. Now they only have is a nationalist idea, nationalism, nationalist patriotism. And outside the kids also have the similar way. So I think this is a great hope. Someone to carry out the leadership from the both, for the both inside and outside use. That's so important, I think.
So I think that's a good place to end our conversation. And thank you so much,
My pleasure.
Gyal Lo. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thank you too for your chance to talking about the Tibetan issue here.
Thank you.
My pleasure.